Hey guys, Tim with Little Crow Gunworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today, Dale and I wanted to do a little video as part of our 270 Fast Twist 270 Winchester series about why the 270 and why we're doing this. This is something that, when we decide to do these projects, Dale and I have, they're somewhat spontaneous conversations. We start talking about a subject and we start firing points back and forth at each other. And somewhere along the line, we go, we should start writing this stuff down, and it ends up turning into a project. So we were doing that the other day about the 270, now that we've already started it. And we kind of stopped and said, we should write this stuff down and maybe make a video out of it. And we, because we thought maybe you as the viewer would find value in it. So
why we're doing a fast twist 270, what's wrong with the old 270, and why we're putting a faster twist barrel on it to shoot some heavier bullets that were developed for the 6.8 Western.
Right. And also talk about why the 270 became popular in the first place. We're not doing this because there's anything inherently wrong with the 270. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just people nowadays, some people, especially a lot of the younger crowd, have a tendency to take these older cartridges that your grandfather had or your dad had and say, okay, well, they're not modern, they're not, as good as the newer stuff, when really there isn't a whole lot of difference other than really the barrel twist. So that's why we did this and wanted to, one of the reasons why we did this and wanted to shine some light on a great cartridge and show that it's not dead. It can be just as relevant as it's always been, and you can still do amazing things with it. So do you want to talk a little bit about why the 270 was popular in the first place, and maybe your family connection with that cartridge? Because I think your story parallels a lot of people that are going to be watching this.
Yeah. My dad had a 270, and my uncles all had 270s, and my maternal grandfather had a 270, and that's the only high power rifles they had. And the only moose my grandfather shot was with a 270, and the story goes they went out after they set up camp, they went out the next morning, and here's a moose looking at him in the logging trail, and he shot it in the head, and they were done the first day or something like that. At some, is a 270 a moose cartridge? Back then it probably wasn't, and it was a good idea for him to shoot it in the head. But now last year I went to Colorado, and the guide says, you want to go scouting with us? And I'm like, sure. And I got up to go, and he goes, grab your rifle, the season's already open. So at that point I was like, I don't know what we're getting into here. So I just grabbed the lightest, my light rifle instead of my heavy 28 Nosler, and ended up shooting a bull that night, a 6x5. They told me it was 275. The guide said it was 275. I think it was closer to 325 because I hit lower and I wanted to. And so I hit it in the lower shoulder, still in the kill zone, but that's also where the bone gets real thick, meaning the joint, and it smashed that bone. That was with the 150 AccuBond, long range AccuBond, and that was that elk looked like it was hit with a 300 Win Mag. I was very impressed with, high sectional density, high ballistic coefficient, bonded core bullets will get the job done.
Yeah, that was with this 270 that's in the series. That I don't know if we mentioned that Dale built it because he wanted it as kind of his backup light rifle and brought it out there last fall, not intending to use it, and ended up poleaxing his elk with it on the first scouting night. So, and he was really impressed with how that 150 AccuBond long range performed. And I know there's a 165 that was made for the 6.8 Western, but as we'll talk about in the series, you don't really gain a whole lot between the 150 and the 165 until you're shooting distances that most of you guys aren't going to be comfortable shooting anyway. So the benefit is really in the little bit of wind drift advantage that you get. So that 150 AccuBond long range is no slouch. And, you know, when Dale was talking about the family heritage with the 270, I think that parallels a lot of you guys where, you know, maybe your grandpa or your dad had a 22 long rifle and he had a bird gun, and then he decided he was going to get a high-powered rifle, and the 270 was well established at the time, being, you know, coming out in 1925. It had already built a reputation for itself when, you know, maybe your parents or grandparents were getting into big game hunting, and it was like an easy box to check. And one thing we talked about with that cartridge is why that cartridge was so popular and caught on the way that it did. And I think there's a lot of reasons, but we can run through a few of them. You know, you had mentioned right off the bat that it had kind of developed a reputation. I think you said Jack O'Connor talked about it, how it was kind of known for when you shoot bullets of different weights at 100 yards, the average point of impact location would be very similar. So that was helpful, you know, if you didn't have readily available the same lot, same ammunition that you always shot, you could kind of pick up whatever you could find and it would hit approximately in the same place. You know, and I don't know if that's always true, but you said it had kind of developed a reputation for that, or he had talked about that.
Yeah, that was one of his big points is, you know, back then they were taking 21-day excursions into the Yukon, and you were going to shoot a moose, a caribou, and
A Dall sheep.
A Dall sheep, and maybe a wolf. Well, for the moose part of that, you might want to use a heavier bullet. You know, I'm not sure when the 160 partition came out, but they were using some 160s from smaller makers, and you know that you could, you know, depending on what was on the menu that day, you could just plug in the ammo that you wanted to shoot, and it would be close enough. A lot of times, I'll do the same thing, but typically, you know, you might have a long range load that's zeroed at 200 and more of a woods load that's zeroed at 100, but it works out where I've done that with the 308. Well, the 270 is kind of known for shooting, you know, you can shoot a thick jacketed heavy bullet and also a light bullet, and it's going to be reasonably close.
Right, and I think that kind of alludes to the next point we made when we had this original conversation, was that part of the reason the 270 became so popular is that it was very flat shooting, especially for the time, you know, predating laser rangefinders and ballistic solvers and that sort of thing. Hunting was more about maximum point blank range, like where can I set something, say 2-3 inches high at 100 yards and effectively keep the animal kill zone within my trajectory for 300 yards or whatever the number was. So that was more how hunting was done, and still is for a lot of people to this day. And the 270 shooting as flat as it does with the variety of bullet weights, that was very conducive to that style of hunting. So I think that's part of what made the 270 so popular, and also that it's an inherently accurate cartridge. You know, we're kind of joking that it's not really a hand loader's cartridge, and if you go to your local range and look in the brass bucket, you're more likely to find 270 Winchester than anything else. And it's not because you can't load the 270 Winchester effectively, it's that it kind of shoots sub-MOA most of the time, and there isn't a lot of meat on the bone for the average hunter to hand load because it shoots small enough with factory ammo, you know, Federal Blue Box, that,
Right.
you know, there's not a lot to gain from hand loading.
Right. Yeah. Lots of velocity and lots of accuracy, and it, you know, probably the people that have really developed this cartridge, you know, it's a Magnum cartridge, but it really doesn't. In essence, it's a Magnum cartridge because of the flat trajectory, but it's within your comfort zone for recoil. You're not gonna, you know, a lot of times 30-06 is beyond the comfort zone of the average guy that doesn't shoot a lot. You know, our customers do shoot a lot, but, you know, I'm tired of recoil myself. So the trend is to go to a smaller cartridge, because with the bullets and the velocities we're pushing these days, the lethality, these smaller cartridges are more lethal than they were 30 years ago.
Right. Yeah, years ago, before you had the high ballistic coefficient and that sort of thing, it was more about raw horsepower, and that's when Magnumitis kind of took over. It was about, how fast can I push these bullets? Well, the 270 really is a Magnum cartridge. I think kind of the bar for that is if it'll push medium to higher bullet weights around that 3,000 foot per second mark. That's kind of the untold line of what a Magnum is, and the 270 does that in spades, and it does it very accurately. So although people have hand loaded it for generations, it doesn't really need it, and I think that's what has really helped its popularity over the years. It's best suited to medium game, kind of that 130, 140 grain class bullets, and it does very well with those, shoots those at high velocity and very flat trajectories, and that's kind of the sweet spot for most guys. Is most guys are never going to shoot over 300-400 yards, and it has the bullet weights to do that very effectively on medium game. But we were talking about how this fast twist concept, especially with bullets like the 150 Accubon long range, 165, and then the new Barnes 155 LRX, you can shoot those kind of ranges on elk, not just deer. So it extends your effective ability with that, where historically maybe your line in the sand with elk was 300 yards or something like that. Well, a faster twist rate in these modern bullets can extend that by a couple hundred yards. And if you already have a 270 or 25-06, something like that, you're basically just a barrel swap away to a fast twist barrel, and then you have this whole new world opened up to you to maybe extend your effective range or put you in a position where you can feel comfortable shooting something like elk rather than just deer. So it just opens up a lot of possibilities, and as I mentioned in the first video, nobody's really paying any attention to this or working on it, other than the fellow over at Hunt Simple. But it's kind of something that's been, it's always been possible to do this, but nobody's really ever put the time into it. And we think it's a great cartridge, and that it certainly warranted some attention and some love. So, and it actually excited us, and really that's what we work on, is stuff that excites us, not necessarily what's the most popular, in vogue thing at the time. It's like, what do we get excited about? Because we do this every day, so a lot of stuff gets kind of mundane, and if it excites us, it's probably going to excite you guys too.
It's with the fast twist, it takes a very versatile cartridge and makes it even more versatile.
Right.
As you increase bullet weight, it's gonna the recoil is gonna increase, but I honestly think that it's still within the margin that most people can handle comfortably. And
and that's one thing he was getting to, and I wanted to comment on, and I didn't at the time, was that he mentioned the 30-06. Well, if we're talking 7-8 pound finished hunting rifles without muzzle brakes, 30-06 that's a handful. It's not something you want to sit down at a bench, certainly, and put box after box through. It's kind of a check it. Is it close enough? Is it close enough to where you want it to be? And then you go hunting. It's not something you're going to want to shoot a lot. So the 270 lowers that recoil bar quite a bit to where you can, practice enough to become proficient with it and become a better shot and improve your marksmanship, that sort of thing. But it can still get the job done on a variety of big games. So it's kind of in that sweet spot. And we spend a lot of time working on that. You guys know, if you watch our stuff, we build a lot of 280 Ackley improveds. And that's very similar to this cartridge in that it's kind of a sweet spot right in the middle. It can do a lot without beating the hell out of you. And with a fast twist barrel and these heavier monolithic bullets or bonded bullets, can be very effective on big game at ranges that you wouldn't historically use these cartridges at. So I don't know. So we thought it was a cool concept when we talked about it. He told me he wanted to build one, and he already had a barrel ratted away, and I was excited by it because I've never loaded for a 270, and honestly, in my young and stupid years, I kind of thought the same way, that like, that's old news. That's not worth anything. But as I've matured and grown up, I realized that all these things still have merit, and they can all have the modern, twist put on them and be brought up right with all the other stuff and still be relevant.
Yeah, we are transitioning this 100-year-old cartridge into a maximum point blank range cartridge to something that, if you're dialing your scope or holding over and you have a laser rangefinder, it's updating you don't have to have a 7 mag to do that. This cartridge is flat enough shooting and resists the wind enough that it's going to work out just fine. Going over to the hand loading side of this cartridge, a 270 is basically just what's stamped on the barrel. It really depends on what head stamp is on your brass, because there's so much variation. Winchester's thin and the Federal is thicker, so the charge weights are different. So we're not gonna be telling you what the charge weights are. We'll tell you what the increments are and what powders we're using
and basically our recommended stop velocities. With a 24-inch barrel, I'm trying to make that a habit where I tell you, like, with this powder and this bullet weight, here's where you should stop. Because that kind of encompasses what you're talking about, where the case capacity can really affect the pressure of your load. So if you're using traditional reloading manual data, the max in the manual might be way too high or way too low or whatever, because of how much variation he's talking about with the brass thickness. So we're trying to do this the way we do everything, which is super thorough and more detailed, and we like to think we make the best videos out there, and we want to try to do that and pay the respects that we can to the 270 and get everything we can out of it at a safe level without any BS. Tell you guys the truth, and because a lot of what you're seeing is, there's usually an agenda where we don't really have an agenda. We just want to see what this old girl can do, and we're excited about it, and we're going to give you the truth, whatever it may be, whatever the velocities end up at and however it shoots, that's what it is.
Should we talk about the 6.8 Western?
Sure. So just coincidentally, we happen to be working on a 6.8 Western as well, and it also has a 24-inch barrel like this Fast Twist 270. Our Fast Twist 270 is a 7-twist Excalibur 24-inch. This other rifle, the 6.8 Western, has a 24-inch 7.5 twist Proof Research barrel. So we're building that for a client, and I'm doing some work on the gun, so I'm going to be doing some testing and working on some loads and things like that. So we're kind of curious to see an apples to apples comparison between the two, because the 6.8 Western was kind of made to replace the 270. So we're curious to see, although it's a bigger cartridge with equal barrel length and the same powder, same bullet, what's the real velocity difference and what's the real performance difference. And I think a lot of people unfairly will say this one's better than this one without giving them a fair shake. But I'm working on both of them and treating them the same, and I don't really have a dog in the fight. I'm just a curious explorer, and I want to see where we end up. So look for that too. There'll be some content on the 6.8 Western, and then we will be doing some kind of head-to-head comparisons. I think we'll probably just compare the Nosler 150 grain Accubon long range and use the same powder, so it's an apples to apples fair comparison.
It's all going to come down to the chamber is just a vessel for the brass, and it's all going to come down to case capacity. So it's
I do think there's a little bit of case capacity difference, but whether or not that's going to actually show up in a 24-inch barrel and how much it's going to show up, I wouldn't be surprised if it's under 100 feet a second difference, but we're going to find out. So, and bring you guys along for the ride. So that's another cartridge that I've been curious about working on, and we happen to have a guy that wanted to build one, and we just happen to be finishing it up right now while we're working on this. So it's kind of a coincidence that it's going to end up benefiting everybody in the long run, because we can bring you some content on it. But so that's just something we wanted to talk to you guys about. We had that conversation, and got halfway through and we're like, we should probably write this down and do a video on it. We think the audience would probably enjoy it. So we had to get it done because Dale's leaving for Colorado tomorrow to go chase elk around again. So good luck on that, Dale. I hope you have a good time. And
I'm sure I will.
Yeah.
I won't have this 270 with because Tim's using it, but
yeah,
this year we're using a 7 PRC, and
yeah, he's been playing.
That's been a real sweetheart. So
Yeah, he's been playing with a new 7 PRC we put together. That's been a tack driver for him. So I don't think the gun's not going to be an issue. So.
yeah.
So anyway, that's all we had for this one. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, share with your buddies, all that good stuff. We'll see you on the next one.